Hello everybody, and welcome back to The Frank Show, now the 54th most popular podcast in all of Australia. A huge shout out to our long-term partner and sponsor, BP Oil. BP have been providing heat, energy and light products to people all around the world for so long now, and are paving the way towards a more sustainable and environmentally friendly future. Thank you, BP. So we've got quite a show lined up for you guys this week. Long-time friend of the show, Joseph Atkinson, will be joining us today. But before we get into that, I thought it was important that we just have a quick little chat about this stuff that's been going on with Facebook recently. I just think it's easy to get caught up in the advertising and PR hubbub and jargon. I just want to, clear the air and talk about this idea of responsibility. So for those of you who don't know, just a few days past, Facebook announced that 7 days prior to the upcoming US election, Facebook would not be allowing any new or continuing political advertisements. And while on the surface this seems like a great thing, they're helping to stop the flow of fake news and this political propaganda, a lot of people have been pointing out that really this is too little too late. Because the problem comes down to this is a mail-in ballot, a lot of people will already have voted by this point, and a lot of the damage will already have been done. This misinformation will have spread, and things will have been getting worse. So it's easy to think, why is this important to us? We're here in Australia, it's nothing to do with us. But what's important about this is the idea of responsibility, and particularly responsibility for who or what you endorse. I think there's this burden of responsibility on all companies like Facebook, and even on individuals, that we have to be thinking about. Who am I endorsing with this? Are they a good moral thing, and what are they doing contributing to society in a good way? I think that what this whole ordeal with Facebook shows is that a company like Facebook just doesn't have any morality when it comes to who they're endorsing. They just, all they want is the money. They don't care the damage that's done by the products they're endorsing. They don't care, any sense of moral obligation or responsibility. And I think that that's really just disappointing. But, at that point, I think we better cut away to our first ad break. And after that, we'll be joined by Joseph Atkinson. See you in a minute. Oh, hey, didn't see you there. This episode of The Frank Show is brought to you by the hit new app Infidelities. Are you experiencing a slow but steady decay in the quality of your relationship, but aren't quite ready to call it quits yet? Well, Infidelities has got your back. Meet up with thousands of people just as miserable in their relationships as you are. Get to know each other in completely private and secure chat rooms, and find that spark of love that your life has been missing for too long. Infidelities offers the utmost privacy and promises that your spouse will never find out. From mass notifications to completely secure chat rooms, you can get to know all sorts of lonely and desperate individuals without any fear of any sort of retribution. Try Infidelities today and use code SELLOUT to get a 30-day free trial. And remember, what's life without a little infidelity? And we're back, ladies and gentlemen, now joined by Joseph Atkinson, longtime friend of the show. Joe is currently undertaking his master's degree in social sciences, and he's just here to talk to us about some of the current events happening in Australia at the moment. Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. It's been a long day, but we're getting through it.
Well, that's good to hear. So I just want to start today off talking about probably what is, the defining issue of our time and our generation, which is, of course, COVID-19 and some of the impacts it's been having on the world around us. In both of us are living in Melbourne, Victoria at the moment, and here in particular, it's been pretty bad, especially in sectors like aged care. I just want to get your kind of insights on what do you think it is about both Victoria and kind of the aged care sector. Why do you think it's been so bad in there?
Well, Victoria in itself isn't particularly an anomaly. It's just it came back in Victoria, and because people were already sick of lockdown, it feels as though there was a lot less respect for the rules in round two. and
Yeah.
the whole aged care situation is a bit of a mess because a lot of those workplaces are already overstressed, and there's a lot of abuse already happening in those in aged care facilities.
Yeah, I was gonna
With
say
a
we've
couple of
got
Mhm.
got
Yeah,
got family who's worked in aged care before, and she says that it's just abysmal conditions a lot of the time, and it's really confronting some of the stuff you see there.
yeah. Look, nurses don't have enough time to actually get around to everyone and give the care that people expect the elderly to get in those places.
Yeah,
Um, and then there just wasn't enough systems in place. The lots of aged care facilities thought that, what's the backup plan if we get an outbreak of COVID? It's if someone in the facility gets COVID, we send them to hospital because that'll isolate them from the rest of the population in the aged care facility. But then hospitals, unsurprisingly, were like, oh, they have COVID, but they're not on death's door. We don't have the capacity for them.
yeah,
So the aged care facilities were sort of stuck without any backup plan, which meant that they just got spread within the home. And then because they didn't have systems in place to actually address what would happen if someone did get COVID, nurses were working at multiple different aged care facilities.
mm.
So one of them might get sick without realizing and then go and work at three different facilities and then spread it across all of them.
Yeah. I think it's pretty easy to imagine how a situation like that just kind of quickly blows out of proportion. I feel like
Yeah.
is part of it just to do with the fact that, obviously, believe it or not, aged care is filled with elderly people. Is it in part the fact that obviously their immune system's already weakened or possibly compromised, and they're just especially vulnerable? So the moment kind of an outbreak happens, it's just instantaneously escalating to the point of not being able to contain it.
Well, I'm not actually sure on how the infection of COVID works, but they're definitely most at risk for deaths. Like there was just a letter to Daniel Andrews from a group of 13 doctors and psychologists
Mm.
about um, how the most at risk group is that 80 plus age group. And
Yeah.
other than them, the death rate is less than 0.01%. But in that high age group, the death rate is way higher. So it's less about how infectious it is and more about how much more risky it is for that age group itself. Like COVID seems to be pretty infectious regardless of immune system, but it's more about the immune system's ability to fight back against it. And in a lot of elderly people who have existing conditions, their immune system just doesn't have the ability to really keep them alive, and then they'll often die because of the side effect causes of it.
Yeah,
But
it's. Oh no, sorry, you go.
yeah, the aged care I think has got a lot of attention because it is such a hot spot and something that's very dear to a lot of people's hearts. But there's also a lot of aged care issues surrounding those who are elderly but are still living by themselves, particularly in community housing, which is another one of those hotspots where, in a lot of community housing areas, COVID has started to go pretty crazy.
Mm, mm.
Um, but they don't have the attention or the dedicated care that the aged care facilities have. So there feels like there's a neglected part of the aging population that is affected by COVID, particularly on the isolation side, not being able to see people even more significantly than aged care facilities.
Yeah, it is confronting to see such a vulnerable section of our community is so adversely affected. I understand we're also seeing one of the more remarkable things about COVID has been the impact it's had on so many sectors, but especially the education sector, which is an enormous sector and is part of shaping societies. How has kind of education been impacted by COVID, do you think?
Well, anyone in VC at the moment, I couldn't imagine what they're going through. It's the most stressful point in your life, and if you're doing VCE, there's this whole competition aspect to it, and you have that stress of VCE paired with not being able to see people, and that compounding stress and lack of social connection is just like a disaster for mental health, right?
Mm-hmm.
So schools are doing quite a bit to address it with support programs and trying to get things back in person as soon as possible, both for the helping with the stress side and providing the social connection. But it's going to be a struggle for them, for the students, no matter what. And then the younger you go in age, the less attention is focused. Like, I know a lot of primary schools, for their at-home work, lots of them aren't even doing Zoom calls for the classes. They'll get maybe a 5-10 minute video on an activity from their teacher. But it puts a lot of pressure on the parents to actually make sure that those things get done.
Yeah, and all of a sudden we're seeing parents already dealing with the stress of COVID, also juggling working from home and teaching their kids from home, and it's just at this point now where you do feel bad for parents, and for me in particular, it's single parents. Like, how are you juggling all of this stuff and the toll it must be taking on your mental health? It's just kind of it's really quite tragic, I think.
There's a lot of concern amongst psychiatrists and psychologists that the negative economic and mental health effects are significantly outweighing the actual impact of COVID itself, which is why quite a lot of doctors are pushing for reduction in restrictions to try and ease the mental health issues, or at least provide additional support, which there's some being provided, but without the in-person factor as well, over-the-phone support just isn't going to be quite as effective.
Yeah, there's only so much it can really do.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, kind of continuing this talk on education, for me, I'll be really interested to see how a lot of sectors, but education is one of them, are shaped in the post-COVID world, because we're already expecting, this force to work from home and study from home and learn from home has put a lot of reliance on digital technologies. And I wonder, once we kind of emerge from this, is that extreme use of digital technology is going to carry over? Is this now just kind of the new norm, or at least informing what the new normal will be?
In a weird way, I think if it is, it could be a good thing. Particularly in education.
Oh, I'm sorry if you caught that. Sorry, I was just opening a drink. Man, I've picked up. Do you drink much soft drink?
No, I don't.
So yeah, I feel like I don't often either, but I've started drinking Sprite, of all things. I just gotta say, there's something about it which really does just it. I don't know what it is about Sprite. It just kind of like, to use real millennial talk, just hits different. I don't even know if that's millennial, but yeah, I don't know. I just feel like. Sorry, I know it's a bit of a segue. It's just such a great drink. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. Keep going. You're talking about impact of technology, post COVID world.
Yeah, so there's a lot of organisations that are providing a lot of online resources which in a lot of ways are a lot higher quality than what teachers themselves would make, because it's a whole team creating these resources, which then teachers can tap into and use. And that frees up a lot of time for teachers who are notoriously overworked to actually care about the students, which is shown to be one of the, being liked as a teacher and being respected as a teacher is seen to be like the best things for student growth and actual like valuable learning within the school environment, as opposed to being able to deliver content well and provide a good lesson plan. It's really about that student connection.
I think we can all relate to that, where it's just kind of the more you liked a teacher and the more you respected them, the better you as a student feel like you want to do. You want to kind of live up to their expectations.
Yeah. So in a weird way, hopefully, this lean on the online resources will mean that when schools do go back to in-person, that these systems will be in place and everyone's familiar with them, so that teachers don't have to learn something new, and neither do students. And these resources can continue being used while teachers dedicate more time to, well, essentially like mopping up the emotional and mental health strain that this period will have caused, and then continue to help people grow moving forward with it.
Yeah, definitely. And I wonder, do you think that kind of as we're emerging from this whole COVID situation, are there going to be mandatory requirements for educational institutions, particularly voluntary ones like universities and TAFEs and colleges and whatnot, to be providing the option of kind of study from home for those who are still concerned about the epidemic?
That is a really interesting idea. In terms of the tertiary space, I know that a lot of it's already mostly online, and depending on what you're doing, you can pretty much get away with doing your university from home anyway. And in the workspace, a lot of businesses have realised that they're functioning just as well, if not better, in the online space as opposed to in person. It limits some of their capacities, but in other ways it's actually made them a lot more effective. But in terms of the actual school, primary and high school education, I don't think it's in anyone's best interest to be staying at home. There are obviously concerns about COVID re-emerging. So I think if you've got people who are high at risk living at home with you, it's probably understandable that schools will give students the option to stay home. But otherwise, I think the actual learning that will need to happen and the social connections that will need to be reformed, it's probably better if the slow rollout of going back to school happens and everyone's back in that space.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I just want to kind of segue the conversation a bit, because obviously with COVID, it's easy to get caught up in how this is affecting us, but obviously we are still, as a planet, grappling with the consequences of environmental degradation and the worries of how are we as societies going to kind of pave the way forward to a more sustainable and renewable future in the hopes of mitigating climate change. I'm curious to think where you think kind of the burden of responsibility lies for that. Is it on individuals? Is it on companies? Is it on governments?
Pretty much solely on governments.
Yeah, you think?
Organizations and companies they'll function, their function is to make profit, and they'll do the best they can with that in the framework. And that framework is set by the government. And then people, individuals, can vote and lobby and protest. But as individuals, their aggregated impact as an individual is really negligible. Like actual council usage of water. So that's all the personal homes in Victoria,
Yeah.
in all the personal homes and what the councils use it for, is 10% of water usage. It's not the same for greenhouse emissions, but it's a similar situation.
Hang on, Joe. Sorry, what's up?
The sponsor, they have pulled out.
What do you mean the sponsor pulled out?
I don't know, just last minute they pulled out.
This is a joke, right? You're telling me the BP pulled out.
That's correct.
How are we meant to run the show? Oh my god! This is insane. They can't do that. We have people to pay. What am I going to tell the makeup department?
I'm not sure.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!
You guys all good over there?
Yeah. Sorry, Joe. We're going to be right back. We're just going to take a break to ad break. Yeah, we'll be right back. Cut it. This episode of The Frank Show is also brought to you by Kotex Ultra Thin Pads. Ladies, let's face it, none of us like it when that time of the month rolls around. But that doesn't mean life has to stop. That's why I use Kotex Ultra Thin Supers. Not only are their pads soft and thin, they have a rapid dry core which quickly absorbs for maximum protection. Use code SELLOUT to get 25% off your first order and get back to being amazing. Alright, cut. Okay, we're back. What were we talking about?
Whether who is responsible for who holds the most burden for climate change?
Yeah, governments hold the most responsibility.
Yeah, because people as individuals don't have a huge impact, and companies just work within the framework. So it's really up to individuals to work as groups to lobby government, and then government can set the framework which business will operate in and individuals will operate in. Like actual incentives to say increase recycling, they make negligible difference. Like I know in my local suburb, there's been 2 major spikes in the amount of resources recycled from the suburb. And the first one was when recycling was introduced. And then since then to the current, 1 or 2 years ago, there was a lot of campaigns to increase the amount people were recycling, encourage people to compost more, figure out how to use soft plastic recycling, and then the soft plastic recycling was able to happen at home, and there was another spike in how much waste was being reused.
Yeah, we've got
campaigns to use those properly, and then the latest spike was when compost bins were introduced and the council would collect them. And then there's been another spike. So all the efforts to get individuals to change their behaviour haven't actually done anything. It's when the system changes to enable and encourage people to act differently is when actual change will happen. So it's very much on governments and policymakers to make the changes which everyone else will operate within.
Yeah, we got FOGO here. Certainly no, it won't be the companies that do anything, but it's weird. I know there's there's a lot of pessimism in the world right now. Do you think we're going to sort climate change out, or do you think we're just screwed?
It's look, humanity will keep on going. And apparently there's rumours of inside groups like Greenpeace that the planet's pretty much and it's time to essentially implement prevention plans because we've already gone too far.
Yeah.
But at the same time, humanity itself isn't going to be wiped out. The main issue is that people that are already suffering and aren't uh, in a position of power and privilege already are going to be the ones who suffer more and are going to essentially get destroyed by climate change. So us here in Australia are probably going to be fine, but it's a lot of developing countries that don't have the capacity to rapidly change because they just don't have the economic capability to, that are going to be hit the hardest. But then they also have the least capacity to respond to it. That is going to be the greatest situation of the next 100 to 100 years.
Yeah. I guess it doesn't really matter at this point. It's all ruined,
Yeah.
man. It's all ruined. I'm
Oh my
ruined.
God.
What am I gonna do?
Climate change is affecting you?
Forget climate change. I'm talking about the show, man. We don't have the money to keep this thing in operation. What, I'm meant to do this without the support of BP Oil?
Uh,
Look, let's just
well,
move on. Do you know much about US politics?
not a huge amount, but I can talk about it a little bit. Not really my area of knowledge.
Yeah, US is crazy, man. I don't know what's happening with that election. What do you?
Yeah. Is the podcast still going?
Yeah, it's.
Okay.
I guess, yeah. Well, do you think Trump's gonna win? Does it matter if Trump wins? Does it matter if anyone wins? Everyone loses eventually.
I mean, it would be ideal if Trump doesn't win because he seems quite unresponsive to policy pushes from the public, and having someone who actually listens to the public more would probably be appreciated in a position like that.
Probably would be appreciated. Well, Joseph, thanks for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great to have you on the show. Hope we can do it again sometime.
Yeah,
Alright.
good to be here. I'll see you later.
Goodbye, Joseph.
Bye.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in to the Frank Show. We'll be back next week. Peace out.